I came home to a moving truck in my driveway. My own family had been planning it for weeks, and I had no idea. A deputy had his hand on my shoulder, asking me to breathe. And I remember thinking how strange that was, a stranger in uniform, standing in my living room, in front of my own fireplace, telling me to breathe, while my mother stood 20 feet away on my front porch, screaming that I was destroying this family. "Ma'am," Deputy Hartman said carefully, "I need you to stay calm, so I can help you." I nodded. I breathed. And somewhere between one exhale and the next, something inside me shifted permanently, like a gear clicking into place that would never go back. I had spent 31 years being the one who caved, the one who apologized first, the one who smiled through it and told herself this was just how families worked. Not anymore. Not in my house. Let me back up, because you need to understand who I was before Saturday, September 14th, so you can understand who I became after it. I grew up in a small house in Pueblo, Colorado. Third of 4 kids, except we were really 3 kids, and then Lydia. Lydia was the baby by 9 years, which meant she grew up in an entirely different family than the rest of us. The family where my parents had finally run out of patience for consequences. By the time she hit middle school, they had stopped being parents and started being fans. She dropped out of community college twice. She had Owen at 22 with a man who left before the due date. She had Piper 2 years later with a different man. Different story. Same ending. I loved my niece and nephew. I want to say that clearly. Owen was 7 and obsessed with dinosaurs in a way that felt almost spiritual. Piper was 5 and would put her hand in yours without asking, like she just assumed you wanted to hold it. They were not the problem. They were never the problem. The problem was that my family had spent 30 years treating my competence like a community resource. I was the one who got the scholarship, the one who finished her degree in civil engineering, the one who paid off her student loans by 28, started a retirement account at 26, and drove a used Subaru Forester because I understood that the math of wealth is quiet and slow and entirely unimpressive to look at. I rented an apartment in Denver for 5 years while I saved. I didn't go to Cabo. I didn't buy things I didn't need. I brought my lunch. In 2021, I bought the cabin. 11 acres in the foothills outside Netherland, Colorado. 45 minutes from my office in Boulder. A creek that ran along the eastern property line and froze every January into something that looked like sculpture. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a wood-burning fireplace, and a wraparound porch where I could drink coffee and hear nothing. Nothing. For the first time in my life. It cost $487,000. I put down $97,000. My name, and only my name, went on the deed. My parents gave me $1,000 as a housewarming gift. I bought a couch with it. My mom asked me to save the receipt in case they ever needed it back. I should have understood everything right then. I didn't. The red flags came slowly, the way they always do. It started 8 months earlier, in January. Lydia had been renting a 2-bedroom in Colorado Springs, but she called me one Thursday night, crying, saying her landlord was raising her rent by $600 a month and she couldn't afford it. "You have the space," she said. It wasn't even a question. "I work from home 2 days a week," I told her. "I need the quiet. I need my space. It would just be temporary." "Everything with you is temporary, Lydia." Silence. Sniffling. She hung up. My mother called 20 minutes later, and she did not lead with hello. "Your sister's going to be on the street," she said. "With 2 babies. She makes $38,000 a year and pays $1,100 in rent," I said. "There are other options." "Easy for you to say, with your big house." "My house that I paid for." "Family property," my mother said quietly, almost to herself. Then she changed the subject. I filed it away in that part of my brain where I put things I didn't want to look at. That phrase. Family property. I should have treated it like a declaration of war, because that's exactly what it was. In February, they started driving up on weekends. The whole crew, Mom, Dad, Lydia, the kids. Just visiting, they said. Just spending time together. They'd arrive Friday evening and leave Sunday afternoon, and the first few times, I told myself it was fine. Even nice sometimes, watching Owen hunt for fossils along the creek. But then I started noticing things. They were looking at rooms too carefully. My mother would pause in the doorway of the second bedroom with a measuring expression. Not quite a smile, something more like assessment. Lydia walked the property line one afternoon while I was inside making lunch, and when I asked what she was doing, she said she was just getting some air. My neighbor, Eleanor Rowan, is 73 years old, a retired schoolteacher who's lived on the adjacent property for 22 years. She baked me a pie the week I moved in. She has a voice like a bassoon and an absolute commitment to truth. In March, she called me. "Someone's been asking questions," she said. 3 times in 2 weeks. A woman with blonde highlights, very friendly, asking the neighbors how you are, whether you travel a lot, whether the cabin is used as a rental. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I was calling you." My hands went cold. "That's my sister," I said. "I thought it might be." "I called Lydia." She laughed it off. "I was just curious about your neighborhood." "God, you're so paranoid." I called my mother. She didn't answer. I sat in my living room that night, staring at the fireplace, telling myself I was overreacting, that my family was messy and dramatic, but not calculating, not deliberate. I was wrong. In April, my father called and said something I didn't register as important until weeks later. "You know that creek property, you should look into whether it could be subdivided." "I'm not subdividing my property, Dad. Just saying. Could be worth a second structure, depending on the zoning." I thought he was making conversation.
I was wrong about that, too.
I found out later, through a records request I submitted in October, that in May, someone had called the Netherlands Planning Department to inquire about zoning variances on my property. The address was mine. The caller left no name. I have a very good guess. By the way, if you're still with me at this point, make sure you hit subscribe. I've got more stories like this one coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss them. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in September. I was in a meeting reviewing load calculations for a bridge replacement on Highway 119 when my phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then rang outright. "Mrs. Rowan." I excused myself. "Mara." Her voice was barely a whisper. "There's a moving truck in your driveway. A big one.
White.
Your family is here. Your mother, your father, your sister, the children. They're carrying boxes inside. One of the men said they were moving in." A pause. "They said you knew." I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. "Call 911 if they break anything," I said. And I drove. The drive from Boulder to Netherlands is 45 minutes on a good day. I did it in 32. I don't remember most of it. I remember the way my hands looked on the steering wheel, knuckles white, tendons visible, and I remember thinking with strange clinical clarity, they planned this. This is not impulsive. This was planned. When I crested the hill and saw my property, my vision went strange around the edges. My mother was standing in my driveway, directing 2 men I'd never seen into my house with a box spring. Using her hands the way she did when she was in charge, little conductor's gestures, efficient and satisfied. My father leaned against the moving truck with his arms crossed, watching. Lydia was hauling a box through my front door with her shoulder. Bored expression. Door open. Just open like it was hers. Owen and Piper were chasing each other through my pine trees. I parked. Got out. My legs worked mechanically. My mother saw me first. Perfect timing. She actually waved. "We need help with the heavy stuff." I kept my voice as level as I could. "What are you doing?" It wasn't a question. She smiled. That particular smile she'd been using my whole life. The one that means you're being difficult and adorable about it. "We're moving in, sweetheart. Your sister needs space. This is family property." I looked at my house. At the 2 strangers carrying my sister's mattress through my front door. "You gave me $1,000, I said. 3 years ago." "Money is money," she said. "Don't be petty about it." Lydia pushed through the front door, turned, and tossed over her shoulder. "The key was under the planter, by the way. You really should hide it better." Then Owen came flying across the yard, sandy hair everywhere, and grabbed my arm. "Grandma says I get the room with the big window. She says you won't mind." She had told the children. She had sat down with a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old and told them which room they were getting. She had made it real for them. made it home for them, before I could say a single word. That was the moment I stopped being someone who caved. I walked inside, stepped over a box in my own hallway, locked myself in my home office, and made 2 calls. The first was to Randall's locksmith in Netherlands. A man named Randall actually answered, which felt like a miracle. "How fast can you get to me?" He said 2 hours. I offered double for 1. He said 50 minutes. The second call was to the Boulder County Sheriff's Department. I was transferred twice before I reached someone who could help. Deputy Aaron Hartman. 8 years on the force. A voice like gravel and efficiency. I told him what was happening. He listened without interrupting, which I appreciated more than I can explain. "Are they on the deed?" he asked.
No.
"Any documentation? Lease? Legal agreement? Anything in writing?"
No.
"Have they established residency? Mattresses set up? Food in the kitchen? Personal items?" I listened through the door. Furniture scraping. Boxes being dropped.
They're working on it, I said.
A pause. His tone shifted in a way that made my stomach drop. "I need to tell you something important. Colorado eviction law. If they establish residency, it becomes complicated. They'd have tenant rights. Removal would require a formal eviction process. 60 to 90 days. 60 to 90 days. My family. In my house. Because I hadn't come home fast enough. Get here," I said. "Please." 20 minutes out. Don't confront them alone. Here's what I did in those 20 minutes. I came out of my office. I walked to the back door, the side door, the basement door, and locked every deadbolt. I shut every window on the ground floor and latched them. My neighbor Walter, 61, retired contractor, had installed a second set of interior slide bolts on all my exterior doors 2 winters ago after a break-in up the road. I had thought he was being excessive. I slid every single one. Then I walked to the front door, where one of the movers was trying to bring in a second mattress. "Stop," I said.
He looked at me.
"This is my house," I said. "Put it back in the truck." My mother appeared behind him. "Mara, stop being dramatic. Stop."
Just to her this time.
She looked at my face, and for 1 second, she faltered. I used that second. I stepped outside, closed the front door behind me, and locked it. She found her voice again fast. It went from sweet to vicious in the time it took her to blink. "Open this door right now, Mara. We have mattresses out here. It's getting dark. You are embarrassing us." Lydia shrieked in front of the movers. My father walked up last, and his voice was quiet, which was always the worst. Quiet meant he thought he already knew the outcome. "She'll cave," he said to my mother. "She always does." I sat down on the floor of my own entryway, back against the door, phone in my hand, and called the sheriff's department back. I did not cry.
I want to be clear about that.
My hands shook. My chest felt like something had been carved out of it. But I did not cry because there was no time, and because some part of me for the first time was not sad. Some part of me was ready. Deputy Hartman arrived 19 minutes later. Tall, 6 feet 2 inches, methodical, the kind of person who assesses a situation by going quiet rather than louder. I met him on the porch with the folder. I had been building that folder for 8 months without fully knowing why. Mortgage documents, the deed, property tax statements, insurance records, the purchase agreement. All of it in a manila folder in my filing cabinet, because I'm a civil engineer and I understand that documentation is the difference between a load-bearing wall and a suggestion. Hartman read everything. He asked me 3 questions. Then he looked at my mother, standing in my driveway, arms crossed, chin raised, and said, "Do you live here?" She drew herself up. "We're moving in. This is family property." "Do you live here?" Silence. "Do you have documentation proving ownership or any legal agreement granting you right of residency?" She opened her mouth.
Closed it.
Hartman turned to me, handed back my folder, and said flatly, "This is her legal residence. You've been asked to leave. If you attempt entry, it becomes breaking and entering." Lydia started crying. Owen started crying because Lydia did. My mother pointed at me with a shaking finger. "You will regret this," she said. "You will be sorry for this for the rest of your life." They loaded everything back into the moving truck while Hartman and his partner, Deputy Chen, watched from the driveway. 40 minutes. My father drove past last, window down. "This isn't over," he said. He drove away. I stood in my yard in the dark and listened to the creak. He was right. It wasn't over. 3 days later, I came home to find fresh gouge marks around my back door lock. Deep ones, like someone had used a pry bar. The door had held, thanks to those interior slide bolts. But the frame told the whole story. Mrs. Rowan had seen everything. She'd been on her porch with her evening tea when Lydia's minivan parked at the bottom of my access road at 2:15 in the afternoon. She watched two people approach my property from the tree lane, not the driveway. One of them was definitely Lydia. The other was male, heavy-set, early 30s. She had taken photos on her Samsung Galaxy. I stared at those photos for a long time. Then I called Margaret Osei. Margaret Osei, JD, is a Boulder-based attorney specializing in property and real estate law. 16 years of practice. She has a framed copy of Colorado Revised Statutes Title 38 on her wall, and she talks like every word is billing time, which I respected completely. I showed her the photos.
The door.
The folder. She was quiet for a moment. "I want you to understand what they were attempting," she said. "What they tried on September 14th was establishing residency under the assumption you wouldn't act fast enough to stop it. When that failed, they moved to forced entry. This is not a family dispute, Mississippi Lane. This is a pattern of illegal conduct. What can I do? File criminal mischief charges for the lock tampering. Apply for a civil protection order, property-based, under CRS 13-14-105, which will prohibit them from approaching your property. And document every single incident from this point forward." What about my niece and nephew? My mother's already telling people I abandoned the family, that I left the children with nowhere to go. Osei paused. "Is there genuine risk to the children?"
No.
"Lydia's lease isn't up until January. Then the narrative doesn't hold. I'd suggest a clear factual statement to anyone who's been told otherwise." I already knew who that was. Mrs. Rowan had mentioned it. My mother had spent 3 visits telling the neighbors that I'd offered to share the cabin, then changed my mind when it was too late for them to make other arrangements. She had spent weeks building a story in the community before I could contradict it. My mother understood, on a deep and intuitive level, that reputation is infrastructure. You build it before you need it.
So did I.
On September 21st, I filed a criminal mischief report with the Boulder County Sheriff. Deputy Hartman took the statement himself. On September 22nd, Osei filed for the civil protection order. On September 23rd, I sent a certified letter to my parents and to Lydia, drafted by Osei, stating clearly, the property at 4812 Creekside Road was solely and exclusively mine. Any attempt to enter, claim, or encumber it without legal authorization would result in criminal trespass charges. All future communication regarding the property was to go through counsel. My mother called 47 times in 2 days. I counted before I blocked the number. Lydia texted me a photo of Owen asleep with a caption, "He cries for you. He doesn't understand why his aunt abandoned him." I screenshotted it.
Sent it to Osei.
She added it to the file. The protection order hearing was in a wood-paneled room in Boulder on a Thursday morning. My mother came with a handwritten timeline. Lydia came with Owen and Piper, who sat in the hallway with a woman from Lydia's church. The judge was the Honorable Patricia Fenn, 24 years on the bench. A face that had heard every story ever told and had decided somewhere along the way to simply look at the paper instead. My mother spoke for 11 minutes. She said I had verbally agreed to let the family stay, that I'd led them to believe the cabin was available, that she'd spent $2,300 on the moving truck based on my assurances. Judge Fenn listened. Then she looked at my documentation, deed, mortgage, property tax records, certified letters, the locksmith receipt dated the day of the attempted move-in, Mrs. Rowan's affidavit, 2 pages, single-spaced, signed and notarized, the photos of the gouge marks, the criminal mischief report. And then Osei played the voicemail. My mother's voice. From the night of September 14th, clear and unambiguous. "We knew you'd fight us on this. That's why we planned it for when you were at work. This is bigger than your feelings, Mara. The room went absolutely still. My mother's attorney, a man named Fisher, who had the energy of someone deeply regretting a professional decision in real time, said nothing. Judge Fenn looked over her glasses at my mother. You've stated that your daughter verbally agreed to this arrangement. My mother nodded. And yet you also left a voicemail acknowledging that you scheduled the move for when she was at work, because you anticipated her resistance. Silence. Those two things, Judge Fenn said, cannot both be true. She granted the protection order. Full property protection. 500 feet. All immediate family members. 18 months. She also issued a formal recommendation that the criminal mischief matter proceed given the evidence of attempted forced entry. My father, who had sat in the back of the courtroom without speaking, walked out without looking at me. Lydia gathered the kids in the hallway, and I heard through the open door Piper ask, "Mama, is Aunt Mara in trouble?" And Lydia said, "Don't worry about it." My chest did something I didn't have a name for. I just let it. The community piece came later, and in some ways it was the hardest. My mother had done her work well. 4 of my 5 neighbors had been given a version of the story where I had promised something and withdrawn it, where the grandchildren were casualties of my selfishness, where family loyalty had been sacrificed on the altar of my pride. I went door to door, and I want to be honest about what that felt like. Humiliating. I'm a private person. I've always believed that what happens inside a family should stay there. But my mother had already made our conflict a public document. She just thought she'd control the narrative. I brought a single sheet of paper to each neighbor.
Deed.
Protection order. No emotional appeal. No defensive posturing. No drama. Just, here is what is true, and here is what has been documented by a court. My neighbor Tom, a retired electrician who'd been told I'd left the kids with nowhere to go, read the paper twice. Her kids are fine, I told him. Lydia's lease runs through January. The children are not at risk. He handed the paper back and said, "That took guts." Walter, who'd installed my interior bolts, didn't need convincing. He'd seen the gouge marks before I had. He shook my hand at the door. Mrs. Rowan, when I came to thank her for the affidavit, held my face in both hands and said, "You are not the problem. You have never been the problem." I almost lost it. I held it together until I got back to my car. The criminal mischief charge moved slowly, as these things do. Detective Rosa Palacios, 11 years in, the kind of professional who schedules follow-ups before you have to ask, confirmed the door damage was consistent with a pry bar. She found fibers in the door frame, a partial boot print in the soft soil beneath the back step. In November, Lydia's boyfriend, the heavy-set man in Mrs. Rowan's photographs, was identified through social media. His name was Kyle Brett. He had a prior charge for criminal trespass in El Paso County 3 years earlier, which made the current situation significantly less ambiguous to the DA. Kyle Brett pled down to criminal mischief, Class 2 misdemeanor, $750 fine, 18 months probation. Lydia wasn't charged. There wasn't enough to charge her directly, and honestly, I wasn't certain I wanted that. She had 2 children who were not responsible for any of this. My parents weren't charged either. The voicemail was evidence of intent, but not action. The law is specific. But the protection order stood. In the months after, Lydia found a 3-bedroom apartment in Colorado Springs, cheaper than her old place, quieter neighborhood, better school district. I know this because Owen called me in December from a number I didn't recognize, his voice formal and careful the way kids get when they're trying to be grown. "Grandma says we can't talk to you," he said. "But I wanted to say Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, buddy. Are you mad at us?" "Never," I said. "Not even a little bit." He hung up fast, like he was afraid of getting caught. My chest did something complicated that I decided to just feel instead of name. My parents went quiet in a way I'd never experienced from them. Not the silence of retreat, the silence of people regrouping. My mother posted 2 things on Facebook about children who abandon their families, about bloodlines that run cold. Then, apparently, someone in her friend group with better judgment talked her out of continuing. The posts came down after 4 days. My father called once, in February. "I hope you're satisfied," he said. "I'm working on it," I said. He hung up. The cabin is quiet in winter. That's the thing I love most about it. The creek ices over and makes these low cracking sounds at night that used to unsettle me, and now feel like company. I replaced the back door frame entirely. New lock, new hardware, new deadbolt. Walter helped. We did it on a Saturday, and he wouldn't let me pay him. So I made chili, and we ate on the porch in November coats and watched the light leave the mountains. I started seeing a therapist in October. Dr. Anita Vora, 12 years in practice, specializing in family systems and what she calls the specific grief of kin estrangement. In our third session, she said something that unlocked something in me. You didn't lose your family on September 14th. You've been losing them for 30 years. September 14th is just when you found out. I sat with that for a long time. She's right. I know she's right. The cabin, the creek, the property, none of that was really the point. The point was that I had built something slowly and quietly and entirely on my own. And the people who were supposed to love me looked at it and thought, ours. They had never seen me. They had only ever seen what I could provide. When you understand that about someone, really understand it, the way you understand a load calculation or a stress test with the evidence laid out in front of you in black and white, you can't unknow it. The protection order expired after 18 months. I didn't renew it, not because I forgave everything. Not because the door had healed, or the boot print had been erased, or the voicemail had stopped existing. But because I had spent enough of my attention on people who had spent none of theirs on me. The order had done its job. My house was mine. My name was on the deed. My creek froze every January and thawed every April and ran clear over rocks that had been there 10,000 years before any of us arrived to argue about who they belonged to. I go to work. I come home. I make coffee on the porch on mornings when it's still dark, and I watch the pine trees come clear in the light. And I don't owe that moment to a single person on earth. That's not coldness. That's what it feels like to finally live somewhere nobody can take from you. My mother said I would regret this for the rest of my life. I think about that sometimes, when the coffee is hot and the light is good, and the creek is doing its thing down in the valley. I'm still waiting for the regret to show up. So, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had someone you loved look at everything you'd built and decide it was theirs? What would you have done in my position? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know.